A few months ago, there was a whole controversy about Kingdom Come Deliverance and diversity. It actually piqued my interest. How diverse could Kingdom Come Deliverance truly be in the 15th century? I decided to do some research and decided to attack it from the 15th century perspective. Let's talk about it. Long distance travel in medieval times was only for a specific reason, because travel took a very long time. One of those reasons was commerce. Then there was, of course, religion. There was troop movements / wars, and then last but not least, diplomatic missions. Commerce. During my research, I could only find a trade map from the 11th and 12th century by Martin Manson. Although there were changes since that time, this map still holds somewhat true in the early 15th century when it comes down to the trade routes. The Portuguese explorer Bartholomew Dias would only round the Cape of Good Hope in 1488, which would change the map that I just showed you completely, because it opened up trade routes with the Asian countries. The Suez Canal would not replace the trip around the Cape for 381 years. It opened up on November 17th, 1869. This meant that trading ships from Asia would find themselves at a hard stop at the mouth of the future Suez Canal. That's where their wares would end up going to a closer city on the Mediterranean, such as Alexandria. From that point on, the ships would largely follow the coast, because most travel back then was line of sight to port cities in Europe. The closest Mediterranean port to Gothenburg would be Venice. Travel to and from Venice, however, would take you around the Alps, which is, ironically, still today one of the preferred routes. Trading over the road would often mean multiple stops. Tolls were levied along the way, so only very high-valued items such as spices and silk would make the travel. Due to the tolls levied, it was very rare for a trader to make the entire trip. There would be multiple stops where other traders would take the goods, mark them up, and distribute them further. Money is king, and the sheer distance does not help either. On modern roads in a car, it takes just over 9.5 hours. The same distance in a trading caravan, whose speed probably did not beat a single human walking, would be about 20 kilometers a day. So this trek that takes 9.5 hours by car would take you 44 days in a trade caravan. Religious reasons. Pilgrimage was another reason why people traveled long distances. Brabant bar Soma traveled to Europe from China in 1287, traveling roughly 14,000 kilometers before starting on the return leg. Citing the previous 20 kilometers a day, the trip would take 700 days. In reality, he was gone for many more years and passed before making it back home. And additionally, his route did not take him through Bohemia at all. Troop movement and wars. Now, to keep it with Bohemia, Jan Žižka, the future general of the Hussite movement, is a prime example of this. He was born in a town called Trocnov in Bohemia, but reportedly fought in the Battle of Grunwald on the 15th of July, 1410, during his time as a mercenary. According to Google Maps, his birthplace is 903 kilometers away from Grunwald by car on modern roads. Another example would be Templars during the Crusades. They would often leave from staging grounds in France and then move overland and sometimes the sea to the Holy Land. Now, if you could take the most direct route, it would be about 4,200 kilometers. If you look at this map, Godfrey de Bouillon was the first crusade, which is depicted by the green line on this map. But what about this?
A curse on Moors and Saracens. What manner of name is Hazim? Irish? Cornish?
Moorish.
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves is still one of my favorite movies ever, and this scene will forever go down in history as one of the best ones ever. So a blind guy not realizing that he's talking to a Moor, and then he says Moorish. It's perfect. It's perfect. I love it. But it is a little bit misleading, because the people, the Moors, were actually a name given to the people that lived in the northern part of Africa, and also in the Iberian Peninsula, which is now Spain and Portugal, because they did do an incursion there in the early medieval times, and towards the end of the medieval times they were kicked out. They largely had a Mediterranean complexion rather than the sub-Saharan as depicted in the Robin Hood movie. However, there are pictures out there from the times that show sub-Saharan people with them as well. Diplomatic missions. In 1402, there was an Ethiopian embassy to Venice, which is the first recorded time that a sub-Saharan culture had diplomatic relations with Europe. Now, it's also thought that in the 14th century, some Ethiopians made their way to Europe to go on pilgrimages. However, this cannot be verified. Identity and orientation. The church was the driving factor in everyone's life in 15th century Bohemia, and in fact the entire Holy Roman Empire, which meant that everyone went to church and everyone believed in God and followed the Word of God. If you deviated from that, the church could get involved, but worse, lawmakers as well. Lawmakers unfortunately looked at the Word of God and they used that word to make their laws, which meant that in some cases, if you did wrong in the eyes of God, you could be put to death. This is something Jan Hus found out when he was burned at the stake for heresy, which ultimately led to the Hussite Wars. Now, KCD1 had numerous instances where you could rat people out for not following the faith. So when it comes down to identity and orientation, these things matter, because if you have this inside the 15th century, people are going to be put for a choice. Hey, am I going to help these people, keep them from the church, keep them from the law, or am I going to throw them under the bus? These are all choices that are very realistic. To say that people with different orientations and different identities did not exist in the 15th century would be very dumb thinking, because that kind of stuff goes all the way down to the first humans, essentially. Because people, they had to find out who they are. And if you deviated from the norm, and especially in those days, they kept quiet. They kept to themselves. They kept silent, because the ramifications of not doing so would be very, very bad. Conclusion. In my opinion, diversity was already present in Kingdom Come Deliverance 1. One of the first people you meet is a German. You fight against humans. These people are both not native to Bohemia, so that is, I believe, diversity right there. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, you have a major trade city called Gothenburg, which means that there is way more chance of finding someone truly unique. However, with the previous stuff that I talked about, it is still pretty unlikely, because there has to be a reason to take these long trips. And those reasons that I previously added, it's going to be very rare for someone to undertake a trip to the center, not just a coastal city, but the center of medieval Europe. It's just not something that I see happening. But you'll still have Germans, because they are the wealthiest in Gothenburg. There will be Italians. You'll have the Cumans. You'll of course have freaking Markfart, which we're finally going to 100% get our vengeance on. All in all, I'm excited for this game. And I think this whole controversy, people are looking at it from the 21st century. You need to look at it from the 15th century. You need to take that perspective, sit down, calm down, read through the history, and you'll quickly figure out that things are the way that they are because that is how they were in the 15th century. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you liked it, thumbs up. Hit me with a subscription. We're almost at 500. The end goal is, of course, 1,000. And as always, hashtag game for the sake of gaming. And I'll see you guys on the flip side. Take care. Yes, and I know that this is not period correct. It's more Renaissance, I think, than medieval. But I still had this in my closet from my LARPing days. Yes, your boy did LARPing. Don't judge. Take care.